Greetings, friends! I invite you to come monk with me. This is going to be a 3-part guide covering cross-class abilities, equipment and stats, and finally, abilities and rotations. Monk is a high DPS class that focuses on maintaining a low global cooldown and attacking as many times as possible. It is a job requiring a high skill cap. This is due to the choices you must make throughout the encounters to maintain your Grease Lightning stacks and its heavy use of positional attacks. Due to level 50 abilities completely changing your rotation, this guide is mostly aimed towards characters at max level. However, it can also be a good resource for players leveling up and looking to eventually playing a monk. I am a theory crafter at heart that takes every opportunity to improve his overall performance in any situation. I will never claim to be the best, and I am always willing to learn new things, so if you have a legitimate suggestion about something that I have missed, or perhaps am ignorant to, please leave a comment below or message me in game. I am Xeno Vex on Sargatanas. Let's monk it up. First things first, cross-class abilities. The first 3 I'm going to mention are mandatory abilities, so leveling other jobs to the appropriate level is going to be needed here in order to achieve maximum damage output. The first cross-class ability you want is Invigorate. It is hands down the biggest DPS increase and most important move a monk can cross-class. This move instantly restores 400 TP with a 2-minute cooldown. Since the cooldown isn't short, timing this move and getting the maximum value of it is crucial. Ideally, you want to activate this skill when your current TP is between 550 and 600, so that way after using this ability, you get back up to max. You can also time this ability with the TP regen tick. So let's say your TP is 610. You should activate another ability and continue with your rotation. This will drop you to around 500 TP. Then, in between GCDs, use Invigorate. This will put you at around 950 TP, then the TP regen tick will bring you back up to 1k. Here, I'll show you a quick example. I can't stress this enough. Timing this move properly and making full use of this ability is very important to monk DPS. As a monk, you will go through TP like a madman, and the worst thing that can happen is running out of TP 3/4 of the way through the encounter. The second cross-class ability I use is Blood for Blood. This skill is amazing and deadly at the same time. It increases damage dealt by 10%, and all incoming damage by 25%. Using this skill on cooldown is optimal for the most part. However, if you know you are going to be taking damage because of an AoE or another mechanic, you should not activate this. Playing monk is thug life from time to time, and sometimes Blood for Blood can really mess you up if you activate it at a bad time and take a lot of damage. Whenever you're DPSing, just remember this fundamental principle. Being dead is always less DPS than being alive. So holding off on this skill until after the damage is always the better option. The third cross-class ability you want is Mercy Stroke. It is a finisher type move, meaning that you can only activate it when the target's HP is below 20%. It delivers a 200 potency attack, which, believe it or not, is one of the strongest skills a monk has access to. In addition to its higher damage, it also does not have a positional requirement, and it's off the global cooldown. While rarely relevant, if you happen to get the killing blow with this move, you will also be healed for 20% of your max HP. The cooldown of this skill is 90 seconds. I really like this ability because it is 100% free damage and a flat DPS increase. There have been many times when I've crit higher with this skill than any other monk ability throughout the course of an entire fight. For maximum DPS output, it is a must. From what I have gathered, the remaining cross-class abilities should not really affect your DPS too much, if at all. The last 2 are personal preference in my opinion and aren't the greatest. However, they can provide some utility. I will tell you which ones I use and why. The fourth cross-class ability I use is Bloodbath. I actually really like this skill on monk because I think it synergizes well with Grease Lightning. Bloodbath converts 25% of the damage you deal into HP for 15 seconds with a 90-second cooldown. And since monks attack so fast with their low global cooldown, the healing you get from this skill is actually noticeable. In addition to keeping yourself alive, it also helps healers out in raid damage situations. The last cross-class ability I use is Fracture. There is a lot of speculation whether this ability actually increases DPS output or not. I have seen and done the math myself along with many tests. Without getting too deep into theorycraft territory here, I will simply say this. Fracture is a 200 potency attack, which is indeed stronger than many monk abilities. However, it costs almost double the TP, so over the course of an entire fight, if you keep this up, you will run out of TP much faster, which will lead to a DPS loss. However, I believe it can increase DPS output, but not in the traditional sense. I use this move in very specific situations, mostly when the boss is about to disappear, because at this point the raw damage potency is what you should go after. It is one of your strongest attacks. This also does not contribute to Grease Lightning stacks, so you must be careful on when you apply it. Like I said, a lot of speculation on this with many different opinions, but the bottom line here is you can still have insanely high DPS numbers with or without this move. This move is nowhere near a deal breaker when it comes to monk damage. Now before I get into cross-class abilities I do not use, I will say this. Regardless of your choices of the last two cross-class abilities, Fists of the Earth is better than any defensive cross-class ability that you have access to. So using this when massive damage is going out is extremely important. Okay, now I'll get into the cross-class abilities I do not use. Foresight. It is a defensive skill that increases defense by 20% for 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. Now, I'll be honest here. I don't even like this skill on Warrior. It is the worst cooldown for Warrior and even worse on Monk, because a Monk's defense is substantially lower than that of a Warrior. The only positive thing about this move is having the foresight to never witness this terrible ability on my hotbar. Another cross-class ability I do not use is Keen Flurry. This skill increases parry rate by 40% for 20 seconds with a 90-second cooldown. I do not like RNG-based cooldowns. You can never rely on them and you must assume that they will not work. Another thing to note is that you can only parry physical attacks, so this cooldown is completely useless against anything magic-based. So for me personally, this is not even an option. Now I understand that that may sound biased, however think of it like this. Even at 80% parry, which is what it is for Dragoon, it is still not reliable because there is always going to be that chance that you will take full damage. So I guess I look at it like this. Why would I take a skill that is not reliable? I would rather take Foresight because of the consistency. Okay, the last three options, not going to go too deep into them for obvious reasons. They are Skull Sunder, Impulse Drive, and Feint. Do not take Skull Sunder. It should be self-explanatory as to why this move is bad. Feint has an extremely low potency of 120 with a slow debuff that doesn't work on bosses. And Impulse Drive is just terrible. It is a 100 potency attack that has a behind positional requirement, making it a 180 potency ability. By using this, you cut down the activations of Boot Shine auto crits and using True Strike, which are both naturally stronger. Not to mention, this does not contribute to the very core of Monk DPS, which is maintaining Grease Lightning stacks. There is no viable reason to ever use this move. However, if someone has found a rotation where this is viable, I would be very interested to see it. Please make sure to include parses. This ends my cross-class section of this guide. And now for part 2, equipment and stats.
Mine's green. Demolish incoming. And then the clap. I got a going to Feeding Frenzy.
What's up?
Ooh.
Oh, we have
shit.
a lot up.
Wait,
Don't
wait,
kill it, don't
kill
kill it, please. That was my bad. I'm sorry, I didn't see this one all the way back here.
We have to
one
kill
more
it right
still.
as he eats it. We
Yeah.
have to. Don't kill it yet. Wait for him
I
to
have
start
nothing
eating it.
on it. I
Or
have
kill.
Oh!
Oh.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Oh.
Xeno,
Shit, my bad. Dude.
highlight.
Oh,
Pay
man.
attention.
The
That
four
was
stack strat. The four stack strat.
The four meteor strat.
Okay guys, let's go over stats in their priority order. But first I want to touch on accuracy real quick. You want to aim for 500-ish with a minimum of 593 and a maximum of 512 total accuracy. I say 493 because on turn 9 this will allow you to attack from the flank and rear without a single miss. However, during phase 4 of the encounter there will be times when you need to stack in front of the boss for certain mechanics. During this time you may see a miss, and this is because to attack the boss from the front with 100% accuracy you will need 512. Now then, stat priority order. Prioritize like so: strength, determination, skill speed, crit. You'll get all the vit you need from your left side pieces, and I normally would prioritize crit over skill speed. However, given that Monk's internal release is ridiculously awesome and skill speed is affected by grease lightning stacks, I believe that prioritizing skill speed over crit will get you slightly better results. I will go into scaling of these stats based on the tests myself and others have done. Do not take this as 100% accurate because I'm sure with more testing and further updates this may prove to be slightly over or under. But I have found that this information collected is still really good to use as a guideline when trying to min-max and optimize your character. Strength. Strength is the main stat for Monk. To be honest, I have had a rough time finding the scaling for this stat because during my test I have found strength to have a slight diminishing returns for every 50 points starting at 300 up to 450. So again, do not take this 100% accurate, but this is the guideline for strength that I have found to be pretty consistent. Strength scales at roughly 5.5 per 1% weapon skill increase. Now another thing to note is that determination had a slight effect on this as well. The more determination I had, the less return I got on strength point for point. It seemed to affect it once 300 determination was reached. Determination. This stat affects the amount of damage dealt by your abilities and auto attack potency. Think of it like shitty strength. It scales a little better than crit at roughly 4.5 per 1 strength. So because this is guaranteed damage with no RNG involved, you'll want to try and get as much gear with dead on it as possible. Skill speed. Skill speed doesn't have a direct impact on your damage output like dead and crit, meaning that you will not notice it as much. It does however increase your overall DPS throughout the entirety of the fight. In comparison to strength, it scales around 5.2 per 1 strength. For every 100 skill speed, you only gain 1 extra attack in 60 seconds of non-interrupted damage on the boss. While that may sound horrible, for Monk it is buffed by 15% because of Grease Lightning stacking 3 times. So point for point, you get a bit more out of skill speed on Monk than you normally would on another job. A couple things to note: skill speed nor Grease Lightning affect auto attacks. Critical hit rate. Crit rate scales at around 5.6 per 1 strength, so a little less than dead, but still really important. The crit damage and healing modifier has a set value multiplier of 1.5 times. However, there are other modifiers and factors that come into play, but for the sake of keeping it simple, if your normal attack is 500, it is safe assumption that you will crit this attack for 750. I prioritize this last because of internal release on a Monk. It is an enormous 30% crit chance. That comes out to around 325 crit rate, and that is crazy. So because of the short cooldown, being only 1 minute, and boot shine auto crits, I feel like you don't get as much from this stat as other classes do, simply because you don't really need it. Now for my gear. First off, I will say achieving the highest item level is top priority, with weapon damage trumping everything. You can aim towards best in slot after getting the eye level of weapon. You want to start with the High Elegant Bagonks, High Elegant Headpiece, Soldiery Body, the High Elegant Gloves, the Soldiery Belt, the Soldiery Pants, and finally the Soldiery Boots. That is best in slot on the left. Moving on to the right. The soldiery neck piece, I need the high elegant neck here. High elegant earpiece. Soldiery bracelet, I need the high elegant bracelet. And that I-100 Rama ring. I mean, come on, the stats are pretty good, right? I obviously need the high elegant ring here and the soldiery ring. Now here's a list of best in slot monk gear. And that concludes part 2 of this guide. Moving on to part 3 after this quick intermission.
That doesn't matter.
Missed the precast.
Oh shit!
Oh,
Dead as fuck. Dead
we
as
should
fuck.
probably tell that guy how to handle that or something.
You
Oh
think?
my god.
You think he thinks that's how it's handled? Because he does that pretty well.
Yo, he tried to assassinate me. The red thing and stood by me. I had blood for blood up. I seen that.
Sorry.
Oh!
You just got all the DPS.
Bro, there's no
It's a one
healers.
stack though, so
Oh my
you got
god.
destroyed.
Who had the comp flag?
That LB.
Oh,
Where are your dots?
They're coming.
they're coming.
Oh Jesus.
Oh my
And you know
God.
what? The worst thing? It's a one stat comp flag.
Run in chat.
Oh my god. This is ridiculous.
This is awesome. I forgot to pay my dots. Can't even tell Garuna to attack the conflict.
Dude, I'm gonna keep this. This is gonna be on our freaking. I'm gonna put this on my stream for a good while.
Okay, I'm going to lightly touch on most of the abilities. However, I will be keeping the focus on the actual rotations themselves. As stated earlier, this is aimed mostly towards characters at max level, so you should already be a little familiar with these skills. One more thing. Because of the variety of encounters in this game, I will not be adding in off global cooldown moves like Steel Peak and Howling Fist to these rotations. Sometimes you do not want to stun, and other times you do not want to AoE. If neither of these matter, then weave them in between your global cooldowns. I will, however, add in when to apply the buffs Internal Release and Blood for Blood. And just to be clear, these rotations are the ones I use because I have found them to be the most damaging. There are many different rotations with slight variations, but regardless of your rotation, your top priority is always going to be maintaining 3 stacks of Grease Lightning. So if you see something that differs slightly from yours, I urge you to at least try mine, and if you find something I do to not be optimal, please let me know. Okay, first off, monks have 3 forms, or stances if you will. Each form has multiple abilities, and each ability will put you in a different form after you activate it. Here are the abilities and forms. Your first form is Oppo Oppo form. Its moves are Boot Shine, Arm of the Destroyer, and Dragon Kick. Using any of these moves will put you in Raptor form. Now from Raptor form, you have True Strike, Twin Snakes, and One Ilm Punch. Using any of these moves will put you in Co-Whirl form. Co-Whirl form has Snap Punch, Demolish, and Rock Breaker. And using any of these will put you back into Oppo Oppo form. This gives Monk a somewhat complex rotation. Knowing the forms isn't as important as the moves themselves. As you'll see, the forms only affect a couple of moves. For the most part, you won't even be thinking about the forms as you make your way through the rotation. Before I get into the different rotations, I want to try and simplify things for you as much as possible, because sometimes in the heat of the encounter with all this shit going on, you will be tripping over yourself trying to decide which move to use. When you DPS as a monk, you should try to keep it simple and consistent. Let me explain. I always start with Touch of Death, for example. However, you can also use Fracture here, then your buff/debuff abilities, and finally apply Demolish if it is not up. So in a sense, you can prioritize your ability order like this. Maintain Grease Lightning, apply your dots, buff/debuff, Demolish, and then everything else. So, with all that being said, I break Monk rotations down into 3 separate rotations. First rotation is based on building 3 Grease Lightning stacks. The second is maintaining those stacks, and finally the last is the Perfect Balance rotation. The Perfect Balance rotation will be much different than the other 2, and I will talk about that rotation last because it will be the one used the least amount of time, and it is also going to be your opener. I like doing Dragon Kick on the last stack build instead of Boot Shine because it lines up your debuff with your Twin Snakes buff and sets up the next rotation better so you don't have to move as much. Not to mention, if you crit with this Dragon Kick, the damage is completely identical. I also like activating Blood for Blood and Eternal Release after you get 3 stacks because you are able to get in more attacks fully buffed due to skill speed increase. This will bring you right into the second rotation, maintaining these 3 stacks. It should look like this. As you can see, maintaining 3 stacks is pretty simple. All from the flank, then all from the back, applying Touch of Death and Demolish when necessary. This is extremely important. You must apply your dots at 3 seconds or less for maximum damage, as well as keeping your Dragon Kick debuff on the boss and your Twin Snake buff on you at all times. Now for the last rotation, Perfect Balance. Perfect Balance is a skill that when activated allows execution of weapon skills which require a certain form without being in that form. So basically, it lets you gain 3 stacks of Grease Lightning with 3 global cooldowns. It will also allow all your abilities to fully activate without any requirements. For example, Dragon Kick will always apply its debuff and Arm of the Destroyer will always silence, and Boot Shine will always crit from the back. This is my opening Perfect Balance rotation. So I will reiterate the mindset of Monk. Maintain Grease Lightning, Touch of Death, Buff/Debuff, Demolish, and then everything else. These rotations are the one I use because I have found them to be the most damaging. There are many different rotations with slight variations, but regardless of your rotation, your top priority should always be maintaining 3 stacks of Grease Lightning. If you follow this simple mindset, you will out DPS every other job in the game. Monk DPS can be quite stupid sometimes. I will now go over the abilities outside of the rotation and add in some final thoughts. Shoulder Tackle. Rushes to target and delivers a 100 potency attack with a 30-second cooldown. You must be more than 10 yalms away to activate this skill. It also stuns for 2 seconds and cannot be executed while bound. This skill is great for opening up a fight and assuming stun doesn't matter, and it also interrupts knockback, meaning if you are hit with this skill, that knocks back or pulls using this skill will override it. Here are a couple examples. Titan's Landslide and when Leviathan tips the boat, so it can be a lifesaver sometimes. One Ilm Punch delivers an attack with a potency of 120 and removes a beneficial status from the target. Can only be used in Raptor form. This skill is pretty useless in PvE, however, in PvP it rocks. Rockbreaker delivers an attack with a potency of 130 to all enemies in a cone before you. This skill can only be used in co-whirl form. This is also your main AoE move as a monk, so whenever there are more than one target, instead of Snap Punch or Demolish, you should definitely use this move. A good AoE rotation I use is Boot Shine or Dragon Kick, then Twin Snakes, then Rockbreaker, and then Perfect Balance, and then spam Rockbreaker until that Perfect Balance wears off. Arm of the Destroyer delivers an attack of 50 potency to all nearby targets, silencing them for 1 second if in Oppo form, meaning after you use Demolish, Snap Punch, or Rockbreaker, if you activate Arm of the Destroyer, the silence will be added to the damage. Now, while this may seem insignificant and lower your DPS tremendously, those rare times where the Bard and Paladin no longer have their silence available, you'll be glad you'll have access to this skill. Steel Peak delivers an attack with a potency of 150 and will stun for 4 seconds. This skill has a 40-second cooldown. This ability is also off the global cooldown and a good DPS boost if the stun isn't an issue. Just weave it in whenever it's up. Howling Fist delivers an attack with a potency of 170 to all enemies in a straight line in front of you. This skill has a cooldown of 60 seconds. This is another great DPS boost if AoE is not an issue. Like Steel Peak, just weave it in whenever it's up. Here are some defensive abilities a monk has access to. Featherfoot. This is a defensive skill that increases evasion by 25% for 15 seconds with a 90-second cooldown. This skill is pretty useless in my opinion. It doesn't work at all in second coil, and outside of coil where things can actually miss, you should never be tanking anything. However, I guess if you ever pull aggro or something, popping this move might work, but doubtful. Decent in PvP though. Second Wind instantly restores own HP with a cure potency of 650 with a 2-minute cooldown. This potency varies with attack power. Not to be confused with the buffs you get from Grease Lightning and Blood for Blood, because those increase damage dealt, not attack power. So in a sense, this move scales with your gear somewhat because the more strength you have, the more it will heal. This will be your go-to move when you get hit. So ideally, you're going to get hit and then pop this move. You're not going to pop Featherfoot, you're not going to pop Foresight, you're not going to pop Keen Flurry. This move is amazing on Monk, and you'll probably use it every time you take damage. Mantra. Increases HP recovery via Curing Magic by 20% for self and nearby party members for 15 seconds. This skill has a 2-minute cooldown. This ability is ridiculously awesome for Monk, and definitely a good skill to use when massive damage is about to go out. Now even if you just use this on the tank, this basically gives them an additional cooldown. So this skill is definitely awesome. And finally, a monk has 3 different utility fist buffs, each providing something useful with only a 3-second cooldown. These buffs will stay on you until you deactivate or switch. Fist of the Wind increases movement speed. This buff is good for progression and PvP, however you probably won't be keeping it on very much for PvE. Fist of the Earth reduces damage taken by 10%. This buff is really good in PvE and PvP. It is hands down the best defensive ability, so if you know unavoidable damage is about to go out, you should definitely activate this skill. Fists of Fire increases damage by 5%. This is your main fist buff you will use in PvE. 5% over the course of an entire fight is really noticeable, so this will definitely be on majority of the time. But yeah, guys, that's all I got. This concludes the guide, and thanks again for watching. I hope I was able to show you some new things, and like I said earlier, if there's anything I missed or left out, please leave me a comment below or message me in game. I am Xenosis Vex on Sargatanas.